All right. So I am here with attorney Tiffany Lesnick. So let's just start by introducing ourselves, shall we? My name is Tabitha Westbrook, and I am a licensed counselor with a bunch of certifications and various things. But the important thing here today is that I am a international expert in coercive control, and that is a lot of what I see in my practice is serving victims and at times perpetrators of coercive control. And so this indictment is very interesting to me. And I'm going to let my friend here, Tiffany, introduce herself.
Thank you, Tabitha. Yes, Tabitha, you are the trauma-informed therapist extraordinaire. If you all need a good practice to find a good trauma-informed therapist, Tabitha is your girl, including all of her wonderful employees at the Journey in the Process. But I am Tiffany Lesnick. I am a domestic violence attorney, and I am also a survivor. I have my own law practice in family law practice in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then I also have a legal coaching and empowerment business through Live Free Legal that's predominantly online. And I also have specialized training when abuse and trauma and violence. And the predominant area of where I work is with victims of domestic violence and coercive control.
So as you can see, you've got the dream team here for being able to talk about this particular topic. So yesterday I was scrolling, as one does, on the Facebooks and saw that John Paul Miller, who is a former pastor, had been indicted on cyberstalking charges and lying to the police, which is never ideal. And so I thought, oh my goodness, because this case got quite a bit of interest. He was married to a woman named Micah Miller. There is a lot in this story, so I'll give the definite Reader's Digest view here. But he began grooming her when she was just a teenager and ultimately married her and then abused her, was coercively controlling her, said things about her from the pulpit that were absolutely reprehensible. And then ultimately she died by suicide. That's the official determination. Now, if you are a true crime buff, you may know that there are some questions about whether or not she did die by suicide or whether John Paul Miller had a hand in it. So we can't speak to that. We certainly don't know. I'm not going to make an allegation that hasn't been substantiated and hasn't been proven in court, but that is the thought and that's the concern that people have. So when this came out that the feds had been investigating him and that there is an indictment, I thought that's big news. And this is going to be of a lot of interest to the community of domestic abuse survivors that we serve. So I'm going to give you the 30,000 foot view about what is this thing we are talking about. So first of all, the federal grand jury is like a group of men and women. You get subpoenaed and requested to come in at grand jury, basically. So it's like any jury duty summons. You get it, and they sit you down and they make sure that you can be impartial. And then you review a bunch of cases. You're usually seated for a long period of time. So it's not like, it's a 2-week trial or whatever. It's usually like a quarter. So usually around 3 months is my understanding that a grand jury will be convened. So you're looking at a number of cases. Grand jury proceedings are completely private. What they are not finding is fact. They're finding that there is enough evidence to move forward with some sort of charge or indictment. A lot of people will hear, oh, you can indict a ham sandwich. And yes, in state court, that's a true statement. But the feds are a little bit different. When the feds indict you, and this is why this indictment to me is so interesting, it is serious. First of all, the feds don't indict you unless they think they've got you. And with the feds, they have like a 90-something% conviction rate. So if you've heard of federal trials lately, the Diddy trial comes to mind, where Sean Diddy Combs was accused of racketeering, had some RICO charges. Like there was a lot that went on with that case. The feds did get some conviction in it. They didn't get the full conviction that they were hoping for, but there's a pretty strong track record here of convictions. And so if they're going to take the time to indict you, they think they have you. Now, obviously, we will not know. We are not the finders of fact because Tiffany and I are not the jury. And the jury is always the finder of fact in a legal case. There's some trivia for you that you can use if you need it. So what we're going to talk about today is the federal indictment and what it says. And then we're going to break down what we think is really interesting for our coercive control victims that we serve. So I'm going to put the indictment up on the screen, and Tiffany is going to read it for us. All right, so you should be able to see the indictment now. I pulled this from a Facebook post by a true crime analyst. It's posted on my Facebook if you need to go see it and where this came from, but this is the federal indictment.
Yeah, it looks like the indictment was filed yesterday, December 17th, 2025. And I did pull actually a press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office in South Carolina that was released today, December 18th, 2025, that did confirm, in fact, that J.P. Miller was indicted with 2 counts, one for cyberstalking and then 2 for making false statements to federal investigators. And so the indictment lists the 2 counts. The first count is cyberstalking. That beginning on or around November 16, 2022 and continuing through on or about April 27, 2024. So it's a period of almost 2 years. And I believe the April 27, 2024 date is the date of her death. In the District of South Carolina and elsewhere, the defendant, John Paul Miller, with the intent to kill, injure, harass, intimidate, or place under surveillance with the intent to kill, injure, harass, intimidate victim 1, used interactive computer devices, electronic communication services, electronic communication systems of interstate commerce, and other facilities of interstate and foreign commerce to engage in a course of conduct that placed victim 1 in reasonable fear of death and serious bodily injury and attempt to cause, and the course of conduct would be reasonably expected to cause victim 1 substantial emotional distress. To wit, and this is very interesting, John Paul Miller sent or caused to be sent unwanted and harassing electronic communications to victim 1, used or threatened to use nude videos and photographs of victim 1 to harass victim 1, posted a nude photograph of victim 1 online without victim 1's consent, placed or caused to be placed tracking devices on vehicles used by victim 1, placed victim 1 or caused victim 1 to be placed under surveillance with the intent to harass and intimidate victim 1, damaged victim 1's vehicle, interfered with victim 1's finances and banking, and interfered with victim 1's daily activities in violation of Title 18 United States Code, Section 2261A, subsection 2, subsection A and B, and subsection B. And what I find very interesting before we get into count 2, Tabitha, is for your viewers to be really paying attention to those particular allegations. Those allegations and what he did, threatening to use nude videos and photos, actually posting a nude photo, placing tracking devices on her vehicle, surveying her, following her around, wanting to know what her whereabouts were, damaging her vehicle. I think he slashed her tires or damaged her tires in some way, interfering with her finances and banking, financial control, and interfering with her daily activities. These are all forms of abuse and coercive control. And I'm sure that those are all forms of coercive control and abuse that would resonate with your audience and also my audience as well. These are things that we've experienced or have had to live through. And I think the good news is that the federal government is recognizing these acts as forms of coercive control, and they're federal offenses and they're criminal. So that's the good news for this indictment that's come down today. And I
Yes, absolutely.
I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that before I go to count 2.
Yeah, I think count 1 is really interesting because I know that I hear this all the time in in sessions with clients that are being coercively controlled or trying to escape coercive control, even if they've been separated. And if I'm remembering correctly, I believe she was separated. And shortly before she passed, she had filed for divorce, which we know in what you and I do is that you are 75% more likely to be a victim of homicide when you leave. And so it's a very dangerous time, even if no one's ever been physically assaulted before.
Right.
And so, like, to see this harassment and the cyber stalking, the feds say there's a federal statute that says you cannot do this. I can't tell you how many times I have worked with a victim and found tracking devices on vehicles or phones or things like that, where they have had intimate moments sent all over the place, sometimes the dark web, sometimes those images have been sold. And I think what you and I both would love to underscore is that is illegal. Like,
Yes.
not just a little illegal, but federal offense level illegal. And so I think that's important for victims to know is you cannot do this legally. So even though a lot of times we'll talk about what happens in coercive control as immoral versus illegal, right? So leaving cabinet doors open a certain percentage, managing all the finances and not giving you access, things like that, that we see a lot. Those are immoral, not necessarily illegal, but this is both. And that's a really important thing because I've had so many victims say, they have pictures of me that they took without my knowledge. They are doing things with those pictures that I don't agree with, that I don't say okay to. They are constantly sending me texts, hundreds and hundreds of them. They are asking me where I am all the time. There's tracking devices here and there. There's cameras in different places and that sort of thing. Just all the stuff that we hear. And I'm not going to give too many details because I don't like people to be able to crime better. Let's just be honest. But this is illegal. So for those who are watching us today or listening to this, if you're going, oh, I want you to have the confidence that this actually breaks federal law.
Yeah, absolutely. And most states are going to have their own laws that govern these types of behaviors too, right? So the individual states are going to have their own stalking laws, distribution of pornographic material, privacy laws, that govern like distribution of your intimate photographs and things like that as well. So there are state laws that also control, and then there are federal laws that control as well. And I think the interesting thing about the federal law is now with the age of technology, right? We've got cell phones and email and social media and GPS and tracking devices and the internet and all of that. Most of those communications are going to be considered interstate communications, which is going to meet the federal code definition of cyberstalking. Right. So if he's blowing up your phone, if he's constantly calling you, I think in it's not the next one. I think I saw somewhere that, the false statements charges. He texted her or called her over 50 times in a day. Mm-hmm. Him just calling you repeatedly, right? That's a communication. And that would count, especially if you've got a internet, or not an internet, but a cell phone service provider, maybe that's got a tower and the lines are crossing from here to here to here to here. We've got some interstate communications going on. Or maybe you're traveling, you went to the beach for the weekend, or you went to visit your family, you're in another state and he's emailing and texting and blowing you up. You've got those interstate communications.
Right. And same for the transmission of the images, right?
Yes.
The servers are often not locally placed near you. They're actually really large data farms. When I worked in clinical research, I used to audit data farms where they had the big banks of servers, and they could be all over the country. So you might have a southeastern bank that was maybe located in, say, Atlanta, and you were actually, generating the data out of North Carolina. That would be interstate, right? Because the data is housed on a server in another location. And I think that's what people didn't maybe realize about this until this indictment came out. Do you want to go ahead and read count 2?
Sure. Yeah. So count 2 is for false statements. The grand jury further charges that on or about October 17th, 2024, in the District of South Carolina and elsewhere, the defendant, John Paul Miller, did knowingly and willfully make a materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statement and representation in in a matter within the jurisdiction of the executive branch of the government of the United States, to wit, he falsely claimed victim one had calling him, I think maybe there's a typo there, more than he had called victim one on March 11th, 2024, when in fact the defendant, John Paul Miller, called victim one at least 50 times more than she called him. He falsely claimed police had never told him to stop contacting victim one, when in fact John Paul Miller was told on March 11th, 2024 by a police officer with Horry County Police Department to stop contacting victim one. He falsely claimed he did not damage victim one's tires or caused to be damaged, when in fact the defendant, John Paul Miller, used or caused to be used a tire deflation device in victim one's tires. This was in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 1001, subsection A and subsection 2.
Yep. And I'm just going to share the last page so you can see that it is signed, and then we'll move back here. But that is, first of all, don't lie to the feds. They do not appreciate it, and you can get indicted, as you can see. So, and again, we are not saying that these are statements of fact that have been proven in court, but this is the indictment. These are the allegations that are being made against former pastor John Paul Miller.
Right, exactly. And these will be tried at a later time, right? Next, he'll go for an arraignment. And then after that, a court date will be scheduled where he will go before a jury who will decide whether or not he's guilty of these things. He has not been charged as of this point with anything related to her death, right?
Correct.
So this is just a 2-count indictment on cyberstalking and making false statements. I still think that's good news because it shows that they're taking this case very seriously and they have their eyes on him, right? Which I think we should have our eyes on him. And the penalties for cyberstalking comes up to 5 years in federal prison. The false statements is up to 2 years in federal prison. And then there's fines up to $250,000.
Right.
So unfortunately that, the penalties, the consequences are not as severe as they would be for murder, but there are consequences. And I think his reputation as a pastor is ruined. He should not be a man of authority in any pulpit anywhere in this country. That's my opinion anyway. Tabitha, you may not agree with that, but I'm just putting it out there.
Oh, no, I agree with that. I would say that by virtue of the fact that he cyberstalked his wife, and that certainly would put us in at least one of the categories for pastoral disqualification in the New Testament, because this is not treating your wife the way you ought, then I would say that he is disqualified from ministry without question. Also, I believe it was proven, and again, there's reporting. I'm going to say there's reporting that he was unfaithful during their relationship. And I don't know any of that, right? And this is one of the things that, the factual basis will come out in trial unless he pleads. So if he were to plead, and there's always the possibility of him pleading to a lesser charge or to some sort of plea agreement with the government, so it doesn't go to trial. And also federal trials are not televised. So you can watch a lot of state trials, which I love. I think that being able to have visibility into the justice system truly does benefit everyone. But federal trials are not that way. So there will be court reporters in there and, courtroom artists and all that good stuff that will keep us up to date on what's happening in that trial, should it ever get to that point. Mm-hmm. And even if he's convicted, the judge will have sentencing discretion, it sounds like. So whether or not, let's say he's convicted on both counts, then, the total years in prison may look a lot different than maybe some people hope, because there's a range of sentencing guidelines that will probably go into effect. My personal hope would be that they decide that if they find him guilty on all counts, that he is convicted to the max and they give him 5 years and then the 2 years, and they run consecutively, not concurrently. Right. So that would be my preference, but he doesn't have a prior criminal record that we're aware of. And so that stuff impacts that. And so I want to just be realistic about what we might hope for in terms of if these allegations are proven true. But, also the tempered of like, the justice system can be very complicated at times, and we don't always see outcomes that we hope for. But it's really important to understand what things are not legal, and what victims can work toward to understand how they can protect themselves. And in this case, like if this is something that's happening to you, if you're getting excessive. Oops, my mic decided to mute itself. I hate when that happens. But if all these things are happening to you, then, if you're documenting them well and that sort of thing, then you may have some recourse at some point.
Right. Well, and the thing, I wanted to go back to the cyberstalking statute, if we can, for a minute, because I think this is really important to point out to victims of domestic violence. And the charges in the indictment read the same way. It's if someone has the intent, and the first word is kill, but I want to remove that word from the statute for a minute. Let's pretend that word doesn't exist in the statute. So they have the intent to injure, harass, or intimidate another person. So it's any of those three things, right? And in the course of doing that, so in the course of injuring, harassing, or intimidating that person, it places that person in reasonable fear of death, serious bodily injury, or there's a standard of substantial emotional distress as well, which we see a lot in our statutes, our domestic violence statute here in the state that I practice in. And I just want to have a disclaimer. I am a North Carolina licensed attorney. I am not licensed in the federal court system. But you do see this standard across many of the state statutes that if you're placed in a state of substantial emotional distress, that qualifies under the statutes, under the domestic violence statutes, to give you relief that's provided under the domestic violence statutes and under the stalking statutes. And what does substantial emotional distress mean, right? Because that's like such this big legal word. It means like the pins and needles feeling that you have, right? Feeling like you need to maybe get on some medication because you have so much anxiety. Maybe you feel like you need to go to a therapist because you're constantly anxious. Maybe you need something to help you sleep at night because you can't sleep. You're having nightmares. You're sick to your stomach. You're experiencing a lot of headaches, or maybe other somatic, bodily symptoms because your adrenal system is so stressed to the max because of the abuse that you're undergoing. Your body's just overwhelmed. And I think, Tabitha, you can probably, as a therapist, can speak to the mental or the psychological and the physical trauma that women go through when they're being abused, when they're being stalked, what consequences that has for women who are experiencing cyberstalking.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I say often is all abuse is physical abuse. And that's because unless you can take your brain out of your head and stick it in a jar, it is A, a body part, and B, it is triggering all kinds of neurochemicals in the fight, flight, or freeze state. And a constant stream of those neurochemicals into your body essentially basically pickles you in your own juices. So too high levels of cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine is going to take a toll on your body. And we see people with adrenal fatigue, autoimmune disorders, all kinds of things, not to mention brain fog and things like that. A lot of times people are like, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just XYZ and fill in the blank? And it's like, well, because A, there was such a high level of control that they could not. And B, it's really hard to think when you're in fight, flight, or freeze. And that's part of our intelligent design that, when we're running from a tiger, that we don't need to have a whole lot of cognitive thought. We need all of the blood going to our extremities. We don't need to worry about digestion. We need to run, right? Or play dead or something like that. But that doesn't equate to us living with the tiger, right? So when we're living with the tiger and we're always in that state, all of these things are cascading in, and we never get the chance to have those neurochemicals reabsorb into our system, or, to get into a rest state at all. And so, I see survivors who are tired and who have all kinds of autoimmune issues, and who are like losing their hair or having different kinds of cancers and things like that, because of the sheer pressure that they are under in their coercively controlling relationship. And that is just the physical ramifications. And so when we look at the emotional ramifications, they may not have a high self-esteem. They may struggle with depression or anxiety, or all of these things all at the same time. I call it emotional spaghetti. It's all in the brain bowl, all on top of itself. And so all of those things can lead to incredible amounts of stress and not knowing who you are and not knowing what to do. And that's why you do need someone like an advocate, a therapist, an attorney to kind of come alongside you in different ways. And I will say, as somebody who's tag teamed with you on cases in the past, having a really good team is really important.
Yes.
So having a therapist, an advocate, and then having a really good attorney who understands coercive control like you do is really helpful. Because, I've worked with attorneys who aren't you, unfortunately, and who are like, I don't understand what the big deal is. And I'm like, let me explain it to you a little bit. So having an attorney who really understands those ins and outs, and then how the law can apply, is really important.
Right. And really going through the legal process is very traumatizing. And so healing can't begin until trauma stops. Right. And so it's really hard for women to really begin the healing process after leaving an abusive relationship if they're going through the legal process, because that in and of itself is also very traumatizing. And especially if you're going through it with an abuser who continues to abuse through the legal process, right? Post-separation litigation abuse. So that's important to know. But yes, I tell women all the time, you've got to have an entire team, right? Not just a therapist and attorney. We got to think about every single player that we can bring alongside of us to support you and help you feel as supported and grounded and valued and loved as possible, to give you as much strength as you possibly can. And I know we're like diverging a little bit, but I think the point I wanted to make about this statute, and what I think is so important about cyberstalking federally and also in the states, is that this is not about like physical death or someone actually attempting to kill you or even putting their hands on you. It's not him making a threat of death. It's most cyberstalking cases are about emotional distress. Right. And a lot of domestic violence cases are about emotional distress. And I don't think a lot of women understand that. I think they think he's never put his hands on me, or he's never physically harmed me, so that doesn't count as stalking, cyber stalking, or domestic violence. And in fact, most stalking statutes are actually a little bit they're complicated, and they're kind of weird to read. But they usually only require one or two acts of some kind of communication violation of some type. So whether that's a cell phone, a social media transmission, something of that kind, it could be stalking. Some stalking statutes also include sexual assault in them, or rape. But it doesn't always include physical harm. So he doesn't have to be physically sitting outside of your home each day or actually watching you. It could just be him blowing up your phone, never letting you have a sense of peace. That can qualify. And what I'd love to see, I don't know, are you familiar with the felony murder rule?
I am not.
Oh, okay. So interesting. I don't know that it would apply here. So some states will have what we call the felony murder rule. And what that means is if you are in the commission of a dangerous felony, and someone dies in the process, so that you didn't actually kill the person, but you were in the commission of a dangerous felony when that person died, then their death you can be charged with their death. So let's say you were in the commission of an armed robbery, and the clerk had a heart attack and died. You could be charged with their death as murder. So it'd be really interesting to see. I would I would be interested to see if we could have an attenuation of the murder felony rule. They have it in North Carolina. I'm sorry, they have it in South Carolina.
Yes.
If, because he's federally charged and this is a felony crime, if they would consider cyberstalking dangerous, which public policy would suggest that it is, public policy would suggest that we have these laws to protect people, right? Because again, it's with the intent to kill, injure, harass, and intimidate, right? These are very serious words. Even if he didn't murder her, even if he so tortured her, so harassed her, so abused her that she felt like her only way to peace and freedom was to take her own life, if he could be charged then with felony murder, I would love to see that, but I just don't know. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, I've heard that South Carolina does have a cyber stalking that leads to homicide, essentially. So like if someone, takes their own life because they have been so harassed, that can lead to a charge of murder. We have seen that in other cases where, and I don't know what state it was in at the moment, but there is a case that I'm thinking of that I watched part of the trial for. And for those who don't know, I watch trials for fun, often gavel to gavel, especially if they are related to domestic abuse and coercive control, because I think it's really important to understand the law. And I think it's important for me as a therapist to understand due process and things like that, so I can best help my clients. So that's why I do some of that stuff. And maybe I'm a little bit of a true crime junkie as well, let's be honest. But there was a trial where it was, I'm pretty sure, 2 teenage girls, and one girl was encouraging the other to die by suicide, and the girl did, and the girl was the encourager, if you will, was charged with the death, and I believe ultimately convicted of it as well. So we are seeing some of that start to take shape in our legal system. So it'll be interesting. A lot of times once you get a federal charge, then evidence comes out in the discovery process. So discovery means show me what you got, right? So every defendant is innocent until proven guilty. So including John Paul Miller, he is innocent until he is proven guilty in a court of law. That is our system. That is how it works. And so in the process, the defense team, whoever that ends up being, will say, show me your goods, attorneys of the federal government, and they will give them all of the pieces of evidence. And then those pieces of evidence get presented in court, and then the jury is the finder of fact. So the jury listens to all this stuff. They don't go do research on their own. Then they talk amongst themselves after they have been given the case to deliberate, and they're going to decide what they believe and what the facts showed. And so then that's when you get convictions, acquittals, things of that nature. So when we look into those spaces, sometimes when those facts come out, then local police with the local state laws will go, oh, look, you've just handed us all of the facts for some other things. And then he may, and this is true of every defendant, there may be additional charges down the line. So we don't know if that will happen here. It is way too early to tell. The issuance of an indictment is truly step one. It's saying, we think there's enough to charge you. And the grand jury said, you go boys and girls, let's get this. Let's see what's out there. And so there's still a very long process. This will probably take multiple years to fully adjudicate. And I just want to be clear about that, because the charging itself is a victory, I think, for domestic abuse victims, without question, and any cyberstalking victim, whether you were in an intimate relationship with that individual or you were not. But there's still a long road until we see this really walk itself through the legal system.
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, I don't want to say unfortunately. I think it's actually fortunate that we take some time in our process here in the United States, because we do have something called due process. I know it's frustrating for the families and for victims that it does take as long as it does, but there are many other countries and cultures where they don't have due process, right? You commit a crime and you're instantly charged and convicted and not persecuted. Help me fill in the word, Tabitha.
Prosecuted.
No, not prosecuted.
No?
Executed. Like you have,
yes.
You have no rights. You have no rights
Right.
to a trial. You have no rights to a defense. You just have no rights at all. So in a lot of ways, it's a good thing that it does take a little bit of time. And yes, there are some technicalities, and some people do get off on technicalities when, they shouldn't. But if everybody's doing their job the right way, then those pieces of the puzzle should not fall through.
Right.
So, again, I keep going back to the statute, right? Because I want our viewers to understand like what this statute does not require and what most stalking statutes do not require. So if this is happening to you, right? If you are being terrorized by someone, in a dating relationship or in an intimate relationship, or it doesn't even have to be, in most cases, a dating or an intimate relationship. There are stalkers who maybe just found you online and you don't even know who they are, right? Or they could be your neighbor down the street and you've never met them before. But they happen to notice you walking or jogging each day, and now they've become a real menace and a real threat to you. But the statute does not require, although part of it is, but it does not require physical violence. It doesn't require you to have a protective order in place in order to qualify. It doesn't require an actual threat. So he never actually has to threaten you. And some abusers are really good at that, right? Like going around. I didn't threaten you. I didn't touch you. I didn't call you a name. I didn't do that. Like they're extremely menacing in the way that they abuse. No direct contact. They don't actually have to have, they have electronic communication with you, but they don't actually have to have physical personal contact with you, and no proof of intent to kill. Okay. Right. So they don't have to actually threaten to kill you. They could, but they don't have to. So if you are experiencing constant communication from someone and you feel just very intimidated and very scared, right, you may want to look at either filing for a protective order or contacting an attorney or a local magistrate to find out whether or not you would qualify to press charges for cyberstalking or stalking in your local jurisdiction, or even federally if possible.
Yeah. I think some of the reports I've seen focused on that intent to kill. But, and he never said that we're aware of, right? Because we haven't seen the documentation yet. But if we even took that out, like you're saying, harass or intimidate, those are the other two pieces that are in there. And that's definitely happening. And I think about, even though I'm based out of both Texas and North Carolina and licensed in a few other places, I'm very familiar with the North Carolina domestic violence statute, which is 50B. And in 50B, there is a subpart that talks about harassment that causes great stress.
Right.
And so it isn't outright threats. It isn't outright other things. And there are a number of states now that have added coercive control language to their domestic violence laws. If you go to womenslaw.org, then you can find the laws for your state there and review them. And if you're curious about it, and I always think this is a fun thing to do. First of all, I like to be friends with attorneys. Let's just be honest. I'm a weirdo. But if you're not like me, though, you should meet Tiffany. She's amazing. I would encourage you be friends with an attorney, or even schedule a consultation with an attorney to learn more about the laws in your state. So if you're really curious about domestic violence law and how it might apply, let's say you're an advocate or you're someone who cares deeply about the harm of others, you might go to an attorney and say, hey, can you explain these laws to me? That might be worth, now, look, I understand that consultation fees are not exactly cheap. It could be a few $100s. Take a friend, y'all split the cost, whatever. But, these might be things that you go and you get some more education around so that you understand the law for yourself, because those are really great things to understand. And a family law attorney will be happy to sit down with you in a consultation and go, oh yeah, this is how this works. And this is what it looks like in the court system. And we do know that there are things that are going to have different flavors county to county, even in the same state. And so just being aware of that. But a good attorney can kind of tell you a little bit about that. And then you can take that information to your therapist, or if you have therapist friends. I think everyone should also know me and my team. Why not? And we can, answer some of those questions for you about, the emotional impacts of having to walk into a courtroom. It's really scary. It's really intimidating, and you're not alone. So for example, with a protective order, you go into this room full of other people doing the same or different things, and you're sitting there, your abusers in there with you, 9 times out of 10. And, it can be super scary to walk through that. So having some emotion regulation and distress tolerance skills can really serve you well as you walk through these paths, or if you're walking through it with a friend.
Right. And a lot of it happens very quickly. So especially if you're filing a protective order, you go from in relationship to having contact and communication to you go file, orders granted, no communication, cut off, he's out of the house, gone. And then we're moving on to the hearing, preparing for hearing. You got to get ready, like boom, 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 boom. And that can be very stressful for women who are having to process a lot of very big emotions. And they don't want to have to make a lot of big decisions, but they have to. So as many people that you can have in your life to support you. Yes. And womenslaw.org is an amazing website. It has domestic violence agencies, state laws, law enforcement agencies for every single state. So you can just click on your state. It'll give you lots of great resources. One of the recommendations that I have for women is if you're looking for a DV-informed, trauma-informed attorney, is to go to the local domestic violence organizations in your area and ask for a referral. Because they're going to refer to plaintiffs-based attorneys or trauma-informed attorneys. Another way to find a good attorney is to get on your local Facebook groups. So go to Facebook group, your county, like single moms of your county or divorcing women of your county. Women talk. They're going to share information about, hey, my attorney, she was, amazing, or this attorney stinks, or this attorney's way too expensive, or whatever. So that's another resource that you can go to find a good attorney in your area. And even if you can't find, or even if you can't afford an attorney long term, if you can just do an initial consultation to empower yourself with some information, because abusers lie, get that initial information overload that you're going to need, because information is power, right? And that's going to help empower you.
Absolutely. Look, when I used to watch Saturday morning cartoons, there was always, when I was watching G.I. Joe, it said knowledge is power, right? And that is a true statement. And if you're curious about court, you can go into, so there's a couple of different, and again, I'm a nerd in this way, I know, but if you got some free time and the courts are running, you can go into where they're adjudicating domestic violence protective orders and watch. They are public proceedings. You can go into criminal court and watch and just observe. Now you do want to go to court looking like you have a job, people, right? Like wear real pants. Don't go in like the people at Walmart and all that, right? But go, and you're not going to use your phone. You're not allowed to record anything. Like, know the rules. Don't break the rules. Judges and bailiffs get very upset about that sort of thing, right? But go in and learn, watch the process and learn about what's happening in court and all of the different things, and learn about the system itself. And that just gives you a lot of really great information. And if you're ever someone who, I hope you're not, I hope people watching aren't, but if you ever do have to walk through a situation where you are being stalked and harassed, then you'll have some information on what the process looks like, and a little less fear, because we fear less that which we know.
Yes, absolutely. And if you wouldn't mind popping my livefreelegal.com in there, because I do walk alongside women going through post-litigation separation abuse, help them with legal coaching and tips and all of that. Is very, very affordable. So even if you can't afford an attorney on your own, I can come alongside you and help give you some generalized legal information, even if I'm not licensed in your state, that will help improve the outcome of your case. It will help answer some questions so that you feel a little bit more comfortable about the process. That's what I do with victims of domestic abuse. I don't know if you want to talk about Tabitha or not, some signs of an abusive personality, because I know when I was watching a lot of the media surrounding this case, I was immediately recognizing like those red flags. I know you've got that shirt that's amazing. This isn't a carnival.
Those red flags do not mean it's a carnival.
That's right. Those red flags do not mean it's a carnival. I mean, just watching his statements, his body language, his demeanor, the things he would say, I was like, oh my goodness, right? This is abuser behavior. This is abuser language. I don't know if they all sign up and take a class, but they all say and behave like kind of the same way. Not to a T, right? There's differences, but I just see it time and time again. I can usually tell my client what their spouse is about to do before they do it. And they come in and they're like, how did you do that? It's like magic. And I'm like, no, they just all act the same way.
It's patterns.
But the blaming her for all her mental health problems, one, the blame, but then two, the mental health issues. Like, oh, she's crazy. She's got bipolar. I don't know what he accused her of having, whether it was bipolar disorder, a psychotic disorder, something.
There was a number. You hear a lot. You hear a lot in terms of like either borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder. Those are ones that a lot of times victims will be erroneously diagnosed with or accused of. Yeah. And, again, that's one of the reasons that I think it's so important for all therapists to truly understand the dynamics of domestic abuse and coercive control so that we know the patterns of it. Right. And so, and I want to back up 1 second to Live Free Legal. I've known some folks that went through that program with you. It was incredibly empowering and helpful for them. So if you are like, I might have to be pro se, and pro se means you are your own attorney. Basically, you're representing yourself. Getting information is clutch, and having an understanding is clutch. And so while Tiffany may not be your attorney and is not offering you legal advice in that capacity, she is giving you tips, tools, and tricks and some amazing coaching. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't move past that before we really talk about some of the dynamics of coercive control. So I'm going to hit the highlights real quick on that. And there's one thing I want to just mention, and I'll throw a link in the chat in just a minute. But Called to Peace Ministries does a faith-based domestic abuse advocacy course that takes place over 12 months. And so if you were like, I need information for myself, for other people, I'm really curious now with all this John Paul Miller stuff. Call to Peace will be starting again in January of this coming year in 2026. And we will start with class 1. I'm part of the training team, and it is amazing. So it is both evidence-based, and we help you disentangle scripture and the ways that it can get weaponized against a victim. So if that's something that you're interested in, really encourage you take a look at the Called to Peace Faith-Based Domestic Abuse Advocacy Court. It's done in conjunction with House of Peace Publications. And Dr. Deborah Wingfield is the one who pioneered this training. And she's been doing this for, I want to say 7,000 or 8,000 years. Like, I mean, it's been forever. The dinosaurs may have been on the earth. She is an absolute expert in this. So you really do. And we have like the best training team. And yes, I'm biased because I'm on it. Fine. But it really is that excellent. And I've taken graduate school classes that did not have this much information. So I encourage you to come if you are a survivor and you're like, I might need a scholarship. They do offer that, and there's ways to apply for that online. So I'm going to dive in quickly to the patterns of power and control. We're all going to be a jerk to each other sometimes, like that's relationship. But the difference between being a coercive controller and just having a really bad day is the pattern. And so now look, if I have a really bad day every third Thursday, that's still a pattern. And it might take a little longer to ferret it out, but it's a pattern. If I were to come and step on your foot, Tiffany, and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, and like I mean it, and I don't step on your foot again, it was a bad moment. Even if I step on your foot on purpose, because maybe you called me a cotton-headed ninny muggins or something. And I'm like, you know what? That's not the way to handle a disagreement with my friend. And I say, I'm super sorry. We talk through it. I don't step on your foot again. It was a bad day. Do I need to repent for being rude? Yes, absolutely. Right. But that doesn't mean that I am a coercive controller. Now, if I step on your foot and go, Tiffany, why was your foot there?
Right.
Like, I mean, I just can't even believe you have feet. What in the world? Mm-hmm. You know, if you know what, your foot was really in my space, I need you to keep your feet out of my space. And then I come and do it again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tiffany, your feet are still in my space, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's a pattern over time. I'm repeating it over time. I'm also making my behavior your fault. You know what I'm saying? Like the fact that you have feet is clearly the problem here. If you just took your feet off, then I wouldn't be able to step on them, right? And if you care at all about my voice, then you're going to start trying to hide your feet when I walk by. Now you're changing your behavior to accommodate my pattern of power and control. And as an abuser, if I were an abuser, I'd go, she did that. Now, if I like run into your shoulder, Tiffany, your shoulder was in my space. Like, I can't believe that. And you call yourself an attorney. I thought attorneys understood personal space, and then you're going to start to do what we call JADE, justify, argue, defend, and explain. No. I mean, I didn't see you coming, and so now when I get closer to you, if I do this enough and you care enough about what I think, your shoulders start to come in even more, right? And this is a bit of a silly example to show how you end up making yourself smaller and you begin walking on eggshells because of this person taking your personhood and saying who you are is not enough. And this can play out in many areas. It can play out in how you raise the children, how they handle any conflict. So if I say to you, I want to go have Taco Bell tonight, I'm craving a crunch wrap. And you're like, Taco Bell? Gosh, only losers, eat Taco Bell. Del Taco is, superior for, people. And you start making me feel bad about enjoying Taco Bell. When you go, where do you want to eat? I'm going to go wherever's fine with you. Wherever's fine with you. And eventually I'm backed up into a cage, and you might have control of the finances, control of my movements. It is not unheard of, again, for electronic surveillance of victims. I saw that you were at the grocery store. Your Life 360 showed you at Aldi for 30 extra minutes. Were you flirting with the cashier? And anybody who's in a relationship and really cares about someone is going to be like, no. Why would I flirt with the cashier? I think he's all of 12, Oh yeah, but I know. I saw how you looked at them the last time that we were there, and you bought an extra bag. Do you know what it does to our finances to buy an extra bag? And this seems ridiculous, right? Until you're in it, until you're married to someone, and until you're like, but their opinion matters. And then if you have other systems like a high control church system saying submit at all costs, although they don't usually use those words, but something similar, then you're going to end up feeling very trapped, and it ends up weaving a web that can be very hard to get out of.
Yeah. Well, and you're buying the 10-cent Audi bag while they're buying the $500, $1,000 big screen TV that same day.
Right. Yeah.
Or they're saying, I didn't step on your foot.
What foot?
I didn't bump into your shoulder. Yeah. You bumped into me.
Yep.
Right. That's also some kind of patterns of behavior. But yeah. And then the fact that he could stand in the pulpit and talk about his wife dying.
Oh my gosh.
Preach that Sunday. I'm like, that just shows like the lack of empathy and human emotion that in some ways is just so indicative of like a sociopath. And maybe I shouldn't have said that word live. I may get sued for defamation, but no accountability, right? No accountability, which is classic abuser behavior. Like, right. I should not be in this church anymore. The fact that I groomed this young teenage girl, have been divorced, maybe had an affair. Now, like, there's abuse going on, and now she's dead. And I'm still going to be the head of this church. That is a problem, right? Just huge. No accountability for my behavior. Classic abuser, controller behavior. Not willing to take any accountability for their actions.
Right. And the fact that the church didn't run him out, I think was the thing, right? I mean, he got up and preached and basically was like, so my wife died. Like, and that's all, there's clips of that all over the internet. And while I can't diagnose psychopathy or sociopathy without examining someone, those are concerning statements purely from the power and control and what is expected typical behavior of a healthy human being, right? So a healthy husband who has lost someone they deeply care for is going to weep. I think recently, so another case that I might have watched gavel to gavel, because I totally did. Let's just be honest, was the Brian Walsh case out of Massachusetts. And Brian Walsh, even though they did not find Anna Walsh's remains, was accused of murder in the first degree of her. And like, bro is searching within hours of her last known whereabouts, how to cover up a murder, how to clean the baseboards, how to do all these things. Like, the internet searches were a lot. It was like, oh my goodness gracious. And so when you look at things like that, and he was convicted, and he was sentenced actually today to life in prison without the possibility of parole for those crimes, that, people around like said he was affable. He was, the life of the party. Everyone loved him, all of those kinds of things. But there was one witness in particular that I was like, huh. And this is what she said on the stand. Well, he texted her all the time. And she'd be out with friends, and within 30 minutes, he'd be texting her, right? And then when he called eventually to say, oh, my wife is missing, 4 days after she was allegedly missing, I might add, one of her friends goes, oh my gosh, like, why haven't you called the police? And he's like, what? Right? His affect, the way he presented, was inconsistent with what you would normally see for a loving spouse when their partner is missing. And the same in this particular case, the typical behavior was very much absent when his wife was missing or after she had passed away.
Right. Yeah. I would think, a reasonable person, a normal person is not going to be able to even make an announcement from the church, right? You're not going to be at church. Someone else is going to be making that announcement for you. And Tammy said in the comments, it's also odd, cultish, and maybe, right? I mean, there definitely are churches like that. I actually had Lisa Meister on my Q&A this morning, and we were talking about more systemic abuse, right? How it can infiltrate systems, not just individual family units. And so if you are in a church and you have a pastor who's saying things from the pulpit, or you have elders or a leadership that you feel like something's not right here, right? It's just in my gut. This is not right. Leave, go somewhere else. The Holy Spirit is probably telling you something, right? If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. And just because you've memorized the words of the Bible, anybody can memorize the words of any book.
For sure.
Doesn't mean you believe them.
Right.
And abusers love to be the center of attention. So if he can use the church, and I see this all the time with my cases, I have plenty of men, I have plenty of pastors, plenty of men who are in high profile positions in the Christian world who abuse that position in order to seek attention for themselves. Then you can tell who they are. So, leave, go find someplace else, as hard as that may be. You don't want to get caught up in that.
Absolutely. You for sure do not. And, in terms of like cultish, I will call it high control religious spaces that twist the word of God. Right. And so that would be cultish. If there's loyalty at all costs, and I see there's another, comment about don't criticize the prophet of God or God will judge you. Don't question authority. Don't speak against the Lord's anointed. Is such a twisting of scripture. And it is such an inaccurate representation of the word of God. And I think this is one of the things we talk about on the Hey Tabby podcast, which I host, that you need to have good biblical literacy for yourself. It is very important because it is a lot harder to deceive you if you know it for yourself, for sure. And I will find the link. I can't find it quickly, but I do have a little assessment about whether or not you're in a potentially abusive church environment. And so you can take this quiz and take a look at it and go, yes, I am in a, safe enough church, or I'm not. And so I will find that and drop it in the comments later. Maybe I'll make it a pinned comment on our video here, but it's It's a lot. And as someone in the chat saying that there's a story about a boyfriend killing a Phoenix woman with a chainsaw because he says she was possessed. I mean, there's a lot of ways to handle things. That would not be the way I would choose. And that also seems a little sus.
Yeah.
And by a little, I mean extremely sus. Again, I'd want to see the data. And I do love a good trial and finding of fact. I like to see facts come out in court personally. I think it's a lot better. There's a lot of things that if you've ever watched a trial, gavel to gavel, you see a lot differently than you would have if you just read about it in a news story. Years and years ago, I was I was retained as an expert witness. That is something that I do with relationship to coercive control and PTSD. And in this particular case, I was a witness related to PTSD in a criminal trial. And, there was a lot that happened in that space that was very interesting to learn and to understand, and to see how the system itself worked and to see how that plays out with the jury and the attorneys and all of those kinds of things. But understanding factual basis for things can be so helpful for people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What I will say, and I don't know if we're limited to the hour or not, what I will say is these trials can be very interesting, especially for us in the forensic world, right? I just sit in court sometimes just to observe because I'm not traumatized by those experiences anymore. I just find the stories to be very interesting. And I also like to see what the judges are going to do because that helps give me information that I can give back to my clients. But what I will say is that these stories are of real people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these are also your stories and they matter. And there are people that are impacted by what happens in these cases and these stories. And in some cases, eternally impacted, right? In this case. So we have a young woman who is not part of our world anymore because of the behavior of her spouse. And so we're all watching that now and very engaged by it. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from that, but these are real people and real stories, and their lives matter just as your life matters.
Absolutely.
And so you are in an abusive relationship. I think my warning to you would be there are many advocacy agencies out there that can help you get out of that kind of relationship so that you don't find yourself in harm's way, right? Whether that means you continue to be abused, your children continue to be abused, or worst case scenario, that you lose your life to an abuser, because we certainly don't want that to happen to you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely not. And I think, we put in the chat, in the comments, domesticshelters.org, that can help you find those organizations near you. We talked about Call to Peace Ministries. Call to Peace provides advocacy free of charge to survivors of domestic abuse across the world. So we have advocates all over the place. So the United States, South Africa, Israel, Canada, the UK. Those are just a few of the places I can think of off the top of my head. And so those are things that you can, places that you can take this, and get some help, go get some help if you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if we want to do a follow-up. I don't know if this information is accurate or not. I got information that his arraignment is in January.
January 12th, I do believe.
Okay. I got that information from like the Justice Department, but I don't know if we can do a follow-up live after he's arraigned. That would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I am happy to hop on again and do another one, give everybody an update about what's going on as we follow this trial.
Yeah. And I just dropped in the chat the link for Is Your Church Safe? And look, here's the term I use for churches, because people be peoply, and occasionally they do peoply things, even when they are amazing. But is your church safe enough, right? Because no church is ever going to be truly safe because of people. There can be mistakes and missteps, but you want a safe enough church, one where you are free to be yourself, ask questions. You don't just have to follow the herd, all that kind of stuff. And that is lauded, enjoyed, invited. And that's really important. So just throwing that out there, that, safe enough is what you're looking for. And if you are in a place where you have been through domestic abuse, and in that was spiritual abuse, and you're like, girlfriend, I cannot set foot inside a church right now. That is totally fine. That is, you will get where you get on your healing journey, and God is, his arms aren't short, and he loves you whether you're able to stand in front of a preacher or not. Let's just be honest. And I think I want to just really encourage the people listening that the heart of God is not oppression. In fact, he is very opposed to oppression. He is not a God that takes that lightly. And I fear greatly for the people, particularly in positions of power, who misuse the word of God. I would not want to stand before him at the end of days. I know I personally, have there, as a counselor, you are a shepherd in a lot of ways. And I take it seriously when it says that not many should want to teach, because God holds you to a higher standard. That's from the book of James. And so I take that very, very seriously.
Wow. Yeah.
Tiffany, do you have anything that you'd like to share? And if there's any links that Tiffany sends me, we've got the Live Free Legal in there. We've got her law firm in there. If there's any other links that we can share, we will certainly share them. But Tiffany, is there anything you'd like to tell our folks that have been watching us?
Well, one of my daughter's favorite expressions is that Jesus would be flipping tables, and especially when it comes to spiritual hypocrisy, right? And so I'll just leave it at that. He came and he challenged some of what was spiritually inaccurate. He was challenging the Pharisees and the Sadducees all the time. And so that comment about, let me go back to the comments, that we were told don't criticize the prophet of God, right? I think that's the case where Jesus would be flipping some tables right there.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, we have a dog in the background, if you heard her.
I love it.
We have a dog in the office today. But I would just really encourage women, there are these stories, but there's hope for you. There's hope this season.
Absolutely.
And this is the rare outcome, right? I've been doing domestic violence law for over 15 years, and I can't count, even on one hand, the number of fatalities that I've had to go through. So, I mean, it's extremely rare. So this happens, but be mindful, this is on a nationwide scale. And so if this is you, I don't want you to be in a state of fear as we leave here today, because there's lots of hope for you out there.
And there truly is. And, again, if you find yourself in a space where you're like, oh, I didn't realize this was my story. I was just hopping on because this sounded interesting. Maybe you're a true crime buff and you realize, oh, I might be part of that. Then, please look to domesticshelters.org. Reach out to Call to Peace Ministries. If you need, to understand legal process in this arena, definitely Live Free Legal. Check them out. It's amazing. If you need counseling or coaching in this arena, the Journey in the Process can help you. That is my practice. And so we just want to say thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you I want to say thank you to Tiffany, because I texted her this morning and I was like, girl, we got an indictment out there. You want to go talk about it? And she was like, I am in.
Yeah.
And so I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. It came at the most amazing time. It was so God ordained, because I was having such a bad day yesterday and I was feeling so frustrated. And I just was like, this social media stuff. So when you texted me, I was like, thank you, Lord. I just needed that today. But I will also let everybody know, if you don't have my Top Lies Abusers Tell guide yet, if you go to my website, I think Tabby put it in the link. It's at the very top of my page. You just click on the link. It'll be sent to you automatically. They all tell kind of the same lies, which are intended to put you in a state of fear, keep you isolated, and keep you where you are. So if you go there, you can grab that guide real quick. And hopefully that will help you as well.
Absolutely. So thank you, Tiffany. Thank you to everybody that came and hung out with us live. If you're watching this on replay, leave a comment in the chat. Just say, I'm part of the replay, or pick an emoji. I don't know, pick a Christmas tree. It's Christmas time. And we thank you so much. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, subscribe to Tiffany's YouTube channel, and we will see you again next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely subscribe, because it helps get more information out there to women who need to hear it.
Absolutely. And make sure you leave a like on this video, because that does help people find it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tabitha. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.